The Socceroos have beaten Saudi Arabia 2-1 away in Jeddah and have locked up their tickets to the 2026 North America World Cup. My name is Lachlan Abel. I'm here with Chris McPherson and Christian Montigan on what is another day of World Cup qualification for the Socceroos. It's pretty special, Chris, and managed to get another win, extend Tony Popovic's unbeaten run now to 8 games is quite incredible. And to kind of turn the tables from where we were when Graham Arnold begun this phase of qualification, it's been some journey.
It has been. I think that's the right word for it. It's been a journey, and it's a momentous occasion, as you say, for a number of reasons. An 8-game undefeated run for Tony Popovic, a win against Saudi Arabia in Saudi Arabia. We know how challenging that has been for the Socceroos historically, and as we were talking about on the live stream that we did covering the game, to do so when, I guess it could be forgiven that, they could have settled for a draw once they pulled level, but they kept pushing forward, and there was some outstanding performances from a number of individuals.
Yeah, so the breakdown of the game itself, Christian, the Socceroos went 1-0 down to, some really good play from Saudi Arabia. It was fascinating. I know you went up for the very early phases of the game, but it felt the Socceroos were almost a little bit stunted, and not because of the extremely hostile atmosphere that a lot of people were expecting, but the fact that it actually wasn't that. The Saudi Arabian authorities had swung open the doors and given free admission to this game, obviously in the hope that they could generate a bit of a hostile atmosphere. But the third tier of the stadium was completely empty, and most of the second as well. And even still on the ground level, there were plenty of spots of empty chairs around. So I think almost they were a little bit disjointed by the lack of intensity that was in the game, and the way Saudi Arabia came out was a bit like that as well. But they got the opener through a little bit of quality, and then it came to Mitch Duke, who provided the assist for the equaliser, and then the head, the nod on off Martin Boyle on the cross for the winner as well. And it's a really interesting, performance from him, a player that has been much maligned, but on the day that the Socceroos qualify for their 7th World Cup, he is going to be the hero of it.
Yeah, probably that crowd aspect obviously would have thrown Australia off. It would have for me anyway. Expecting that hostile atmosphere is probably a master plan, right? A master stroke. Probably a blessing in disguise given that. So I'm not surprised that Saudi started off strong and got that 1-0 lead because, like I've said from the start, they've always needed to get a couple of goals early if they were to make anything of this, right? If they were to have a chance. And that's why it's impressive from an Australian point of view to really hold firm and not let that get to them, right? To get back into the game, not only to get a point, but to actually win the game away from home, a place where they've struggled historically for qualifying at least. It's pretty good. And Popovic, credit to him, right? Because, you look at this game, I'm just going off by the stats because I got off for the last 10 to 15 minutes, but to have 4 shots on goal, 29% possession, it's another ugly win. It's the same as Japan, but you get the job done, and that's been one of the standouts for Popovic since he took over from Graham Arnold, right? It's trying to win in different ways. Yes, it can be ugly at times, but Popovic is just results driven, right? Especially in these first few games in charge where he just has to steady the ship, and that's what he's done, right? He's done a brilliant job since he's taken over the reins, and fully deserved this qualification because, at times Australia have actually played some good football as well. So just great to see that comeback and that fighting spirit again, and hopefully that can instill a bit more confidence and belief heading into the World Cup.
And Chris, we talked about this over the past couple of weeks a little bit, but for these games, for Tony Popovic, it's not like you're pulling into the first few weeks of a league season. You've got 40 games to play and you can afford to drop some results for the purpose of philosophy. These are games that you have to win just to get to a World Cup. And we can't forget that, historically, let's think about the records that we've broken in the last 5 days. We've beaten Japan, the men's national team, for the first time in 16 years, and we've just beaten Saudi Arabia in Saudi Arabia. Those are 2 monumental feats that Australia have just achieved, and no, the football is maybe not pretty, but they've done that. They've broken those odds and they've qualified for a World Cup, and hopefully now is the point where, we're going to have a long list of friendlies most likely in the lead up to North America, and this is the time where we do, we can afford to say, okay, let's forfeit a few results in the name of building something that we want to play in the World Cup, and kind of allowing that time to breathe into a new game plan.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's, as you say, it was one of those pieces. He came in with his back against the wall after we'd lost against Bahrain. We'd had a draw against Indonesia. We hadn't gone, hadn't been Saudi Arabia and Japan that we'd battled against. And then he stepped in and done a wonderful job. And realistically, you know, hindsight tells us that had he, you know, lost some points or dropped any of those games in terms of results, the makeup and the shape of this game would have been a very different story heading in, right? And then it's all of a sudden, you know, maybe we're heading into the fourth round alongside Indonesia rather than where we are. So wonderful that we're not. I guess to that other point is that, you know, he now has that opportunity to build and develop those pieces, which he hasn't really had that as much of a luxury, and he does so with confidence and momentum undoubtedly in him and the squad. And like some stories that, you know, we've heard come out of that game at Optus Stadium the other day against Japan is, you know, the way he had the team revved up at half time. And I was chatting to one of the guys involved with the social media who was in the change rooms, and basically, you know, the fact that he just had that belief and the players bought in and just kept repeating to them, if we have to effing win this in the 90th minute, we will, which, you know, obviously turned out to be the way. So it just seems like there's such a buy-in, such an alignment, and you have to think that breaking those two droughts really gives them some momentum as they head forward to, you know, the next stages of preparation, not qualification for the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be a huge relief. And of course, that undefeated record that Popovic has in competitive games will hold until that first match in North America in the World Cup. So they're going to have enormous belief behind them. Another individual I think is worth touching on, Christian, is Matt Ryan. It was his 100th cap. He is the third most capped men's Australian national team player. 2-1 in something like the 84th, 85th minute. A penalty is awarded somewhat dubiously. I think we were talking live, Chris, that we probably would have overturned it. The tackle from Jason Guerrier looked pretty good, and maybe it was a follow-through inside the box that was awarded for the penalty. But regardless, Matt Ryan steps up in a crucial moment. And again, it wasn't qualification that was on the line, but it was the joy of beating Saudi Arabia in a way and being able to celebrate after this game off the back of a win, which in terms of momentum can't be undersold as well. And a really, really good penalty save low down to his left. And he's had to face a decent amount of, you know, battle for starting minutes in recent windows, with the likes of Joe Gauci really pushing for selection, and he's come out the other side of it and he's proved clutch as well in a big moment.
Yeah, I've just looked back at the penalty save. It was pretty good, to be honest. I mean, everyone knows here that I'm not the biggest Matt Ryan fan, but you've got to give credit to him, right? I mean, in that scenario, you being 2-1 down, you didn't really have to save it, right? But it's that sort of pride on the line. It's sort of wanting to win the game, and that's the sort of mentality that Popovic has, you know, he's brought into the team, right? And you can see that throughout the whole squad. And it sort of stems to Ryan as well, because I think the leadership aspect is so important from him, you know, in between the sticks, and it sort of translates to the rest of the squad. So you need leaders like that in the team if you want to sort of really have a chance to go deep, progress and knockout stages of a World Cup. And I think Popovic doesn't take that for granted at all. So I think he's got a really good mix in the squad. You've obviously got some youngsters coming through, but that experienced leadership core as well. You know, Jackson Irvine wasn't even playing in these last two games, and look at what Australia achieved, right? So it's really something special and really promising heading into these last 12 months. And, you know, look, hopefully we can, you know, get a few friendlies, you know, scheduled on the board and, just improve on a few areas. I'm sure Popovic, you know, he's not satisfied, right? He's never satisfied, even if Australia get wins, right? He's said that in past press conferences, where that's probably the time where we need to reflect more if we do win the game, because there's actually is more room to improve. It's probably easier to rest on your laurels and say, okay, well, we won the game. It's nothing really much to improve. And that's another aspect what I really love about Popovic. So, yeah, a lot of good stuff heading in the right direction for Australia, and some good positivity heading into the World Cup.
Chris, I think we probably should give some more airtime to Mitch Duke as well. He's been a figure that has been much maligned in terms of supporters of the national team. Obviously, a lot of credit is always given to his work rate, which it at times feels both like a compliment and a criticism. That's the thing that is worth complimenting him for. And he does work really hard, and he runs himself into the ground and often provides opportunities for those who are coming on for him in the 70-odd minute, against some tired defenders. But in this game, it was his time to shine. The ball that he played in for Connor Metcalf was superbly timed and allowed him to get into a fair bit of space to tuck home the equaliser, and then just clinical with the header off the corner. He left his direct opponent for dust as soon as the phase started moving, and he allowed himself space for a free header and tucked it home really nicely. And for him, it's almost like this kind of silence the haters moment for him. Obviously, the qualification was well wrapped up by that point, but the fact that his name will be permanently etched onto this kind of qualification game maybe doesn't quite live up to the Tunisia moment. Obviously, the header at the World Cup is something special as well, but for a player who's copped it a fair bit from the public, it must be pretty good for him to have this moment.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. To be fair, I doubt Mitch Duke's probably focused on that at the moment, but I'm sure upon reflection he will look back on this and it'll be one of those seminal moments that he'll reflect on for his national career. As you say, he's been a polarising figure, fairly maligned a lot of the time, but that showing that he put in today, and again it was what his delivery, what his work ethic delivers when it's on. And, it was, as Christian touched on, our performance was against the statistics. So you need these workhorse efforts with some moments of brilliance. And he had two absolutely stunning moments of brilliance. That pass was, as you said, it was sublime. It just perfectly set it up, gave Connor Metcalfe all the opportunity in the world, which he took. And then that header, as you say, he works so well off his opponent in so many situations that it makes it hard. And sometimes you don't see the times where he does get the advantage, but it was so clear where he got the advantage this time. His opponent just couldn't go with him, or had that moment of hesitation and nap, if you will. And he made the most of it. He got up and timed his leap to perfection, and it just looked like he had all the space and all the time in the world as he just glanced at home. So I think, rightfully so. He's going to get a lot of the plaudits for this win. But I think it talks to the sort of footballer he's been, that he's continued on and got to this. But it'll be one of those games that'll go up in his Louvre, if you will, at the end of his Socceroos career, undoubtedly, which will be some time away.
And of course, there is potential that Mitch Duke could be playing back on Australian shores sometime soon. His Makita Zelvia qualified for the Asian Champions League Elite with their very impressive J-League run last season. So potentially could be coming back to Melbourne to play the likes of Melbourne City. We'll see when that draw takes place. But just to finish off this video, I asked this question of both Jacob and Will in our reaction video to the Japan win. And I'm keen to hear your two thoughts on it as well, about just what World Cups mean to you as well. I think, we zoom in a lot on specific games, but from a bigger picture, Christian, particularly for you and I's generation, we don't really know what it's like to miss a World Cup, right? We've had 6 in a row now, and that's been a kind of persistent in our lives. And Chris, maybe you can speak as well, just to kind of the pain of missing out a little bit. But Christian, we'll start with you. What kind of memories do you have on World Cups, and why are they such a significant tournament?
It's probably the 2006 World Cup that probably stemmed the love for football a lot more. I saw the qualification against Uruguay, that second leg, sort of, staying up at night watching that. Although I didn't really understand what was going on or the process behind qualifying, it was still a surreal moment, right? Because you can tell the pandemonium in the stands. Like, my dad was there as well. He mentions that that's the greatest game he's ever been to in his life, and it's just telling me all these stories. And it's just... From there, it's sort of, obviously we've qualified for every single World Cup, right? And I think you and I, Lockie, probably take that for granted a bit, probably expecting that we should be qualifying now for every World Cup, whereas in past generations, it hasn't been that way. It's been heartbreak every 4 years. And, that 2006 moment just sort of broke barriers, right? It sort of sparked this new lease of life for Australian football. And that's, how I sort of remember the Socceroos, right? That penalty shootout with John Aloisi, I'm sure a lot of people do as well. It's one of their best memories, if not their best sporting memory in terms of even Australian sport, not just Australian football. So, even just getting out for World Cups, to have Australia actually in it, to actually have that team to support it, it's really special. So to sort of keep this tradition going, I guess, to keep qualifying for consecutive World Cups. Yes, we shouldn't take it for granted, but we should also soak it in and enjoy the moment. We get another chance to do it at the 2026 World Cup.
Chris?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and you touch on, obviously, just being that little bit older than the two of you. It's my early memories were, the heartbreak of some of those playoffs. The first one I remember, but not so much for the game, was that Australia-Argentina one, going back to qualifying for the US, and the heartbreak of that when we went over to Argentina. Then there was the Iran, looking at the 1998 one, heading into France, and we lost on away goals, which was just heartbreaking after we had a 2-2 draw at home, and that was after that 128,000 Iranians in a 100,000 seat stadium for the first leg. So some absolute scenes looking back at that. And then the final miss, which was the Uruguay, and that was the one where the Uruguayans basically had people staying outside the hotels, making as much noise as they could, shining lights, all these sorts of things, all of the oldest tricks in the book. So the so near but so far, it's almost something we take for granted now that, oh, well, you know, if we hadn't got through in this second round, we'll get through in the third round, especially now with the expanded pieces. But it still means so much. And I think for a lot of generations of football fans, and especially ones that are sort of my age or even a little bit older, where we went through, you know, from 78 to 2002, where we didn't make a World Cup. We'd made one World Cup in history up until we qualified for the one in Germany in 2006. So, and for so many of those, I think 4 of those last 5 that we missed, we made it through to the playoff and then fell at the last hurdle. And it just became, you know, heartbreaking each time until, as Christian touched upon, that momentous moment that literally I'm getting chills now thinking about it, is John Aloisi and the penalty and all of those things. And so it almost feels a little bit anticlimactic that qualifications happened. And I say this with all realisation of the diminishing nature I'm putting on it, has happened with such ease, I guess we'll call it now. We know it hasn't been easy for the team and all those sorts of things, but it feels like it in terms of how we've then gone through and we've qualified again. But nonetheless, it's still, you know, when you think about what this means and the fact that we are going to be on the biggest stage in the world, and, you know, what we did at the last World Cup, and, you know, we got through to, you know, that the round of 16 again, and all those things that it represents is, yeah, I think it's excitement, but yeah, I think I'd encourage everyone not to take it for granted as much as it looks like with expanded World Cups that this should become the normal. It is a momentous thing for us to, you know, be in that top echelon of world football again and guaranteed our spot with qualification still to happen within Asia.
Well said. All right, I think that'll do for this little reaction video. Christian, thank you very much for getting up early this morning and joining me, and we'll see you next time. Go Socceroos.